Hello, it's Mark here. I've just had a look at the video that you're about to watch, and for some reason there's a bit of a light flare. I'm not quite sure where it came from, and given the nature of the books that I'm reviewing, perhaps it's something spooky. Anyway, sorry about that. Hope it doesn't detract from the video, and on with the feature presentation. Hello, it's Mark here from Yokel Bear Reads in the UK, where the weather's turned a little bit colder, so my cardigan is firmly on. Today's video is going to be the first in a series of videos that I'm going to be making that I'm calling The Books That Made Me, or maybe The Books That Made Me a Reader would be more accurate. And in this series I'm going to look at the books that have meant the most to me over the years, or the books that have had the most amount of influence on me, the books that have inspired me, the books that have taught me something about life, or more importantly, the books that have just given me the most enjoyment and entertainment. So to start with, we're going to go way back in time. We're going to go back to about 1975 when I was 10 years old. Now, when I was about 10 years old, every week my mum would give me money if I'd been good. If I'd been well behaved, I did well at school and did the chores around the house, I would get money for a book on Friday, because after, Friday evening, my mum would take me to the market in Swindon, which was a really cool kind of Victorian covered market. It still gives me shivers of nostalgia thinking about kind of the echoes and the old iron roof and stuff like that. But there was a bookstore there, and I was a regular every Friday night. In fact, the bookseller was just, when we went on holiday once, the bookseller apparently was a bit worried because he hadn't seen me, thought something had happened to me. But I would go in and buy a book a week. And it was at this store that when I was much younger, I discovered things like Ladybird books, which again had a huge influence on me. But when I was about 10, I came across a book, and this is the book. Alfred Hitchcock and the Three Investigators in The Secret of Terror Castle. I don't really know what first attracted me. I know what attracts me to the book now, but I think at the time it was just like it was the whole package for me. Had an exciting cover. Look, they're being attacked by probably a ghost inside a suit of armour. Terror Castle. Of course, I was 10 years old. I wanted to find out what was going on in Terror Castle. One thing that really wasn't a selling point for me at 10 was the fact that it involved Alfred Hitchcock. I didn't really know who Alfred Hitchcock was then, but over the years I've become a massive fan of his work because reading these books made me go and find out who Alfred Hitchcock was. But he put his name to this series of books, at least at the beginning part, and he turns up as a character in some of the books, and also sometimes he writes an introduction to the book, which I thought was really, once I found out who he was, I thought, God, this is really cool. Look, he's a famous director introducing this book. Disappointingly, I found out later it was just kind of a publicity thing, and the introductions weren't actually written by Alfred Hitchcock. They were written by the author, but they were really entertaining. So I bought this book, and I think I read it 3 times in the first week that I had it. I could not put it down. It had an incredibly exciting plot. There were spooky moments. And so the next week I went and found that there was another one there. And I think the next one I got was this one, The Mystery of the Flaming Footprints. Now, I didn't really read them in order because all told there were 43 books in this series. There was a kind of revival that happened in the late 80s that were actually, they were really poor. I did read a couple of them. The characters were a bit older and they'd taken out kind of the spooky stuff. So mainly what I'm talking about is this first 43 of the original series. And they had a bit of a formula, these books, which is that you start out thinking that something supernatural or spooky is going on, that there's some kind of ghostly thing happening. And there were some absolutely great ones. I mean, like, there was like an invisible person who seemed to leave footsteps that were set on fire. There was ghosts in a couple of them. There was also, which is one of my favourites, which is the mystery of the Whispering Mummy, which was set in a museum, and a mummy who appeared to be still alive and whispering. So they were very much kind of based on, I think, the old, Universal horror films and stuff like that. But the thing was with these books, the plots were about how these teenagers, who were probably about 13, 14 years old in the book, had formed a detective agency. And in fact, you can see on the back, there's their business card, the 3 investigators. We investigate anything. And they would use logic and applying reason and find out that this wasn't supernatural stuff. It was just people pretending to be supernatural creatures to cover up crimes that they'd been committing. Now you might say, hold on a second, are these a rip-off of Scooby-Doo? Well, actually, if you look at the dates, this book was published in 1964. And Scooby-Doo didn't start until 1969. So if anything, there's possibly an argument that Scooby-Doo was influenced by these books rather than the other way round. These books were the brainchild of Robert Arthur, who was a writer who wrote probably about the first 9 or 10 books, but then after that it was farmed out to other writers. And they had writers like William Arden, M.V. Carey, who probably not many people have heard of, but they were just jobbing writers who were writing these books. Now, the other thing that you might have noticed is, if they've been written by Robert Arthur or the other authors, where's their name on the front? And actually, the first, for quite a while, the authors were never credited on the front of the book. They gave prominence to Alfred Hitchcock, who had just put his name to the series, but really wasn't involved in any way. And you had to look inside. There you go. Text by Robert Arthur. So you could find out who the author is, but you'd have to look really, really hard. Now, by the time we kind of got to the 1980s, because like I said, this ran from 1964 to 1987, they've actually started putting, and I'm just reaching for one here, this is The Mystery of the Purple Pirate, and you can see that actually they've dropped the Alfred Hitchcock thing, and they've actually put the author's name on the front, and that's what happened in the later ones. Now, these were republished a couple of times between 1964 and 1987, but they've never really been republished since. Apart from one country, rather, strangely, well, maybe not strangely, brilliantly maybe, these remained really popular in Germany, and they have been reprinted. And I've seen on Kindle, you can get most of them, but they're in German. And I never learnt German. Maybe I should. But there are some on Kindle, actually, that have been translated into English if you really wanted to pick some of these up cheaply. Now, in terms of the kind of characters, there's 3 investigators, and these characters were great. Again, they may have been a little bit formulaic, but when you're young, when you're 10 years old, you kind of, a bit of formula is not necessarily a bad thing. You had Jupiter Jones, who was the first investigator. He was the brains behind all this. He was an ex-child actor. The character is ferociously intelligent. He's the one that applies the reason. And also his mum and dad owned a junkyard, and they've got this fantastic headquarters, which is this big mobile home that had been buried under junk, so nobody knew they were there. And they had like a dark room and like all kinds of stuff to help with their investigations. Then there's Pete Crenshaw. He was the kind of outgoing, athletic one who did all the running and jumping and chasing things and stuff like that. Also through the books, Pete Crenshaw's got a really good sense of humour. There's this ongoing joke about him actually being quite scared. He's the outgoing one, but he's quite scared of the supernatural stuff. And I had a bit of a crush on Pete Crenshaw, I don't mind saying, because I think Pete Crenshaw was the opposite to how I was as a kid. I was more like the third investigator, which was Bob Andrews, whose job was records and research. Yep, Bob was the library nerd. But, you know, that didn't detract from his character. If anything, there was some of the stories where his research in the library proved crucial to solving these things. Now, in all of the books, it turns out this is human beings doing this, but occasionally a little bit of real supernatural stuff crept in. There was a couple of times that real ghosts turned up, and in one particular, the Mystery of Monster Mountain, the three investigators met Bigfoot, and to be honest, I didn't really enjoy that as much. I liked the fact that that I liked the formula, and I felt that was detracting from the formula a little bit. The other thing is that I love these particular covers. These are the Armada editions from the UK, and I just absolutely love the kind of, just the covers are just brilliant. You don't really get painted covers like this for kids anymore, and I think that's a shame. Anyway, I recently reread The Secret of Terror Castle because I'd actually read another book, which was Lucy Mangan's Bookworm, A Memoir of Childhood Reading, which I will be doing a review of shortly. And that got me thinking about, well, maybe I should pick up some of this stuff that's on my shelves from my childhood and see what it's like. This really stood the test of time. It's a cracking plot. The characters are really, there's funny moments in this that I laughed out loud at, even, like it's decades later and it still made me laugh. And there are occasional moments in here that really did, even in my 50s, I found some spooky stuff in here that did give me the creeps a little bit. So I think these have stood the test of time. And I think it's a real shame that they've kind of largely been forgotten, apart from Germany, but around the rest of the world and the UK and America, they've largely been ignored and forgotten, and I think that's a shame. One of the reasons is that there was a long protracted copyright battle between the original author and the publishing company, and I think that kind of took the whole impetus between the series off the boil a little bit, and again, that's a real shame. Now, I don't have all these books. I did at one point, but you know what it's like. Over the years, I've gone missing and been lent out and what have you. I've probably got about 6 or 7 of the original 43. And do you know what? I think I'm going to start collecting them again. I think I'm going to get onto eBay and scour the second-hand bookshops and see whether I can get some more of these. Or if any of you have got any going spare that you don't need, comment below and I'll take them off your hands, because these are great. These books, what these books meant to me is, now they're a real nostalgia rush, but what they made me remember when I was reading this was just the sheer pleasure of a good plot. And sometimes it doesn't even have to be something that's really out of your comfort zone or a plot that's really surprising. The other thing that really made me think about why these books are important to me was these were my gateway books. Without these books, I really wouldn't have got into the horror genre, and certainly ghost stories. That's where this started, with these books. Also as well, without these books, I probably wouldn't have picked up Agatha Christie when I was about 16 or 17. Because these laid the groundwork of kind of mysteries and whodunits and howdunits. So these books are phenomenally important to me. So these books, the whole series, the whole 43 of them, they're books that made me. So if you like this video, please click like down below. If you want to know when more of my videos have come out, then click the subscribe button and press the little bell thingy. But otherwise, that's it. That's the first of the books that made me a reader. So I say yay to the 3 investigators. These should be more popular, and they're due a revival in my opinion. But there you go. Okay, that's me done.